Okay, let's get started. This is Jim Howard with my beautiful assistant, Wendy, my wife downstairs. We're going to get started tonight, and we're going to be talking about putting together a safety plan. Now, if you have a question, please go to the Q&A and enter in your question there. Wendy will be monitoring that, and if we see that there's a lot of questions, we'll probably stop a little bit so that we can get some of the questions answered. But if not, this is really kind of a short slide presentation, and then we can get straight to the questions. So I just want to tell you how much I appreciate everybody that's coming out. And once again, we're going to be talking about putting together a safety plan. Now, we're going to be doing this on Thursday nights, and in the month of May, these are all going to be free. And then we're going to talk about how to help support the ministry. We really am excited about some of the stuff that we've been able to get a hold of, and we're going to be able to put out for everybody. So just stay with us, and hopefully you'll see something that you can really use and really need. We've changed some of the putting together a safety plan just because of what is going on in the world. And it's just something that we feel is very important. Plus, of course, some of the things that have been coming out lately in reference to possible threats to the church. So let's get started tonight. If you have a question, please go to the Q&A, and Wendy will be monitoring them and then get back with me on this. So here we go. There's a sign of the change, a sign of the times. It's in the past when churches would contact us, it would usually be because of a national incident, as in Sutherland Springs or the West Freeway Church of Christ. This was like the first time that people would start looking at needing a safety team when a national crisis would happen. Or it may even be an issue that happened at their church. When I was asking God to give me a sign whether or not I should be doing this ministry or not, I got a text from one of the churches that we've worked with before where the pastor was preaching on pro-choice, saying that their church believed in pro-life, and it caused an issue to where the person stormed out of the church and started ranting and raving inside their vestibule. Or they give me a call because of domestic issues. And we run into this a lot, but it's a change now. DHS has come out and sent out two different letters about threats to the church. One of them was sent out in reference to some hate group that wanted to spread the COVID-19 by either taking the sweat off their body and putting it in a spray bottle. I mean, this is just what was put out, and spray it on people of the Jewish community. And then also DHS came out, Department of Homeland Security came out and did another letter that talked about that churches, when we start to reopen, when we start to see the changes, that we should be dusting off our security procedures because of just the hate speech that is out there right now. Now, let me be perfectly clear on this. There has been no information, no definite information of a threat against the church. But when we talk about this, we have to make sure that we're clear that there are people that are going to be hurting and maybe wanting to hurt a church. So most of the time when we would get these calls, it was because some sort of trigger happened inside the church. Like I said, in the national incidents of where we would have a shooting, or in the local area where we would have a demonstration of some sort of disruptive attendee. But it always had to be a trigger. And I think now we need to really start to pay attention that this isn't the way it's going to be anymore. We really need to be prepared. More and more people are coming to churches. We have heard through our pastors and church officials that people are reaching out more and more because of what is going on. Because of what is going on in our country, they're looking for answers. They want to understand what has happened right now. So because more and more people are coming to our churches, our responsibilities are starting to grow. And we need to make sure that we protect the flock. More people means more issues. Our world has changed. So when we take a look at this, one of the things that we want to do, and I say this all the time, you should be going to your church leaders and you should be telling them, let's go to the Bible. Because in the Bible, it points to where If we look at Ezekiel 33, 1-6, when I bring the sword against a land and the people of the land choose one of their men and make him their watchman, that's very important because it goes on and talks about that if we do not warn the crowd, if we're not out here watching for the trouble, if we do not warn them, then that blood is on us. So as a church, we need to make sure that we protect the flock. And God has stated this if we just look at Ezekiel 33, 1-6. And then he tells us how to do it in Nehemiah 4:13-18. Because in Nehemiah, he says, fight for your families, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. That's our churches. That's our churches. So what we have to understand is God gives us a plan. He lays it out for us in Nehemiah 4:13-18. Isaiah 62:6 tells us as the watchmen or the women of the world that watching over the church, I have posted watchmen on your walls, Jerusalem. They will never be silent day or night. You who call on the Lord, give yourself no rest. In other words, we have to be diligent in this. We must push on this. If your church does not have a safety plan right now, please get them to talk to us. Let us just sit down and have a conversation on things that we should be really paying attention to. And of course, Ephesians 6:10-12, where it says, put on the full armor of God so you can take your stand against the devil's scheme. And of course, it's against the authorities, against the powers of the dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. If you have not noticed, in this world, we're having a lot of issues right now, and we need to be preparing ourselves to make sure that we protect the flock. I'm not talking Armageddon here. I'm not talking about mass destruction or anything like that. I'm just talking about that there's going to be a lot of people coming to the church in the near future that are going to be hurting, and there are going to be those that don't want us to start up again because we're already seeing it. They don't want us to gather together. So when we take a look at a church, and a church should already have these things in mind, they need to be facing the issues that could happen in their own church. We talk about churches out in the West, and we've just seen it recently where tornadoes have come through and just destroyed areas. They need to have some sort of an emergency plan in case something like this happens. Of course, us down in Florida, we're always looking at the hurricanes. These are natural types of disasters that can happen that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to because it can happen anywhere. You know, when we look at the flooding that happened down, let's say in New Orleans, well, it also happens across like Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where a couple of years back, the river rose up and flooded the town. The Mississippi is always going above its banks and flooding out areas. We need to be prepared. We need to have some sort of a plan, an emergency action plan in case of those type of events. And what would happen if your church had a fire? I mean, we need to know what we're doing. We need to have an evacuation plan. We need to have a plan in place in case we had tornado watches here several years ago, and we needed to know where to go inside the church. Do you know where the safest spot is? I will be honest with you. When it came about, I did not know. I had to get with the person who is the building person, the building maintenance man, and he told me where the safest location was. And I felt bad because I thought it was one location, and he pointed out that it was something completely different. So you need to know these areas in an emergency action plan of some sort. Now, that's just a natural or a fire, but we also have other issues that are facing our churches that we really need to start talking about. We have to make sure that we're paying attention to our children. That is the number one thing. When I go into the church, the first place I ask them to take me to is their children's ministry because I want to make sure that the children in the children's ministry are safe. It could be anything from a domestic issue or a lost child, but we have to pay attention. If you've been listening to the news lately, you see that domestic violence is on the rise because of the stay in home. This is just something that we've never faced before, but because of this, it's putting a lot of stress on people that cannot work. They're worried about their bills. They're looking for answers. And so there's been a lot of domestic issues starting to show up. And trust me, they're going to come into our churches. They're going to be looking for answers. And we're hoping that we can help them, but they have to trust us and they have to trust God. Medical emergencies. If you don't have some sort of plan for a medical emergency, what are you going to do? If you have a person that goes down, let's say in your vestibule or in the bathroom, are you going to stop your church service to ask to see if there's a doctor in the house? Or do you have a plan? Do you have an AED? Do you have a first aid kit? I can tell you right now, you're going to have more medical issues, not maybe emergencies, but you're going to have more medical issues than you're going to have anything else. We constantly have kids running into each other and bloody in a nose or a lip. How do you handle that? Do you have people in specific locations that can help this? You need to start looking at putting together a plan to work on this. We're also going to see more and more lost people. People, they're talking about suicide. The hotline the calls have increased because people right now don't have answers. Of course, we know where those answers are. And of course, those answers are in trusting our God that everything is going to work out, that he is in control. But when you see people now come to your church, you're going to start seeing more and more of those that are hurting that we need to make sure that we catch and we can help. If you've been feeding the homeless or if you've been passing out food, you're going to see more of these people now. We've seen lines upon lines and food lines where people have been giving out food. And because of this, we have to make sure that we have some sort of procedure in play. Of course, I've been hearing about the prophets. There's so many prophets out here that are mad at the government, that don't believe that this is actually a pandemic, that this is something that the government has put together. And of course, there are those who are preaching that it is the Armageddon and that it's the end times. So these people are going to be showing up at our churches. We need to be prepared. We need to have some sort of plan on the issues that are going to be facing our churches when we start to reopen. Of course, then we've got the active shooter. We can't forget that, I know, but this is one of these that I stay away from. We teach this, trust me. I do know that it is a serious issue, but you're probably going to have more of the other issues at your church than the active shooter. But let me just say this. People are mad. And the hate speech that's going on out here, some people might take the pandemic as an excuse to come in and cause issues at the church. And speaking of reopening, are you ready? Are you ready for what has been dealt to us? Churches are starting to reopen. The governor here in Florida has, first off, never said that we could not have our churches open. But we need to start to pay attention of how we're going to do this following the CDC guidelines and what we're going to be looking for. So when we look at the issues that are facing the church, then we have to also start talking about planning. So when we plan, one of the first things that we want to do is talk to our leaders, our staff, and the elders of the church. We want to get out here and we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page, because if not, you might as well stop trying to beat your head up against the wall. Unless the leadership of the church is for setting up a safety plan, it's just going to be a hard road. Now, if everybody is in agreement, then what you want to do is bring in your safety team leader right off the bat to help with the planning of this. Now, what you should be looking for is maybe a policeman or somebody from the military, either active duty or retired. But the thing of it is, more important than anything else, this person needs to be following under the teachings of Paul and Titus, because Paul in Titus 1:7-9 says, since an overseer manages God's household, he must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gains. Rather, he must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. He should be a member of the church, and he should be very much involved in the church. Not just a person that you look at and you can look at all these things in Titus and go, hey, this guy over here looks great. Let's go talk to him. Is he a leader in your church right now? He should be. He should be involved in small groups. He should be involved in the men's ministry. We want to make sure that when we look at a person who's going to lead our safety team, that he understands that the number one responsibility of the church is to bring people to Christ and to expand the kingdom of God. And after that, he understands that he must protect those inside the house of worship. Now, what we have to look at, the first thing that we want to do is we want to get into looking at a strength and weakness assessment. This is very important because if you don't know how you're going to protect your church, how are we going to set up a plan? Now, we can easily talk about issues that are going to face the church, but if we're not paying attention of how we would address that inside the church or outside the church, then we're kind of flying blind. We're just kind of looking at this with our eyes closed. So what we have to do is we have to take a look at our church from the outside. Now, this is a bird's eye view of our church here at Generations. Now, one of the things we kind of like point out is that we have water over here. So in this area over here, if I had a kid or a boy that disappeared from our children's ministry, one of the first things I want to do is get somebody out near the water because kids are attracted to the water. Now, we also have this major road right here that is 55 miles an hour. Now, this is a serious thing. Now, we have uniform officers that help us out during church, during the Sunday service, but we have to make sure that we understand that there can be an accident there. We did have a teenage girl that was killed there. She was skipping school, though, but trying to cross the street at 55 miles an hour, she was hit by a car and killed. But it's right outside our church, so we have to know that these things can happen. Now, you want to know what type of neighborhood you have behind your church. Now, this is a really nice neighborhood. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of great people that live in here. But just a couple of weeks, we had some kids come in and steal 5 cars out of here. So even though we think we may be safe, there are things that are going on. Plus, the other things we kind of need to look at is, do we have any sexual offenders or sexual predators that are in the area? Because if we do, those pictures should be on our walls in our safety office, not outside, not in our gathering area. Because we do, listen, if they do come in and want to turn their life over to Christ, we need to make sure that we're there to work with them. But we need to make it known if they are out there. Now, over on this side of our property, we have some new development. So there's vacant buildings over there, and we had a situation of where our kids were sneaking out of our Wednesday night high school and middle school services and going over to those vacant buildings and smoking and kidding around and doing things they shouldn't be doing. So you need to be paying attention to everything that is going on around your church. So these are things that you want to be looking at when you take a look. If you have a large area, you've got a lot of area you've got to cover. You've got a big parking lot like we do. You should have a rover out there. These are things that we're going to start planning and watching for. All right. Now, not only should we look at our strength and weakness outside, we also need to be looking on the inside. Because if you don't know, if I tell you that I need you to go to the Extreme Kids Children's Ministry and you don't know what area that is in the building, then you're going to be lost. So you need to make sure that you know your building inside and out. And plus, if law enforcement gets there, you want to be able to take them exactly or point them to exactly where they need to go. Having maps like this so that they can see it would really help them out if they showed up on scene and you had a person that was barricaded in one of your rooms. But you need to know this building inside and out. The safety team leader should know exactly where everything is. Hey, if he's good enough, he even has the numbers down. I'm not that good yet, but I'm getting there. But I do know if somebody says A100, I do know that it's in the gathering. I do know that A101 is the worship center. And B112 is the elementary worship center. And B125 is the furthest room back here in the back from the gathering. Now, we also need to know how many entrances and exits there are, because one of the things that we want to try to do is control those. We want to try to control it to where everybody comes into your two. If you have 2 entrances, you have them come in those entrances. You want to limit it. You don't want to have a building that has 20 doors that people can come in. We do have churches like that. And so how can we watch all of it? We can't. It's one of these type of things that we need to make sure that we have 2 points of entry and that we know where our exits are and try to force people into those 2. That way we're looking at who is coming in and out of our churches. You should also have a safe room. Now, a safe room is where you take your pastor in case of a threat. These are important. Now, the criteria of the safe room I like to have is where there's water, and maybe you also have a trauma kit in there in case the pastor gets hurt. But you need to have these type of areas inside your houses of worship, and you need to be paying attention to where, setting it up to where you know exactly where things are, where you would have to go in case of an emergency if somebody called out. You also need to know where your medical equipment is and your AEDs. If they're on a wall, make sure that people know where they are, because if you have a heart attack and you turn to somebody and say, hey, can you go get the AED? And they look at you with a blank look on their face because they don't know where it is, that is time. That is time. And when it's time like that, especially in an emergency, you need to make sure that people are aware of where things are, especially in a medical emergency, where the kit is, where the bag is, in case they need to go get it. So look at your strengths and weaknesses. Look at where your fire extinguishers are. All these different things like that, you should walk through and know this before you even get started with putting together a safety team. Now, once you get to where you're ready for a safety team, you need to look at how many positions you think you need to be able to do a Sunday service. Now, this is very important. A lot of people don't understand when we talk about this, because we want to guarantee that every area of the church is protected. I know that in my church, if I have 6 people, I am really doing well. Now, what you see right here, where the R1 is, the G1, G2, this is if I have more than enough. But I know that if I have 6 people, I've got it covered. And one of the most important positions, and a lot of people don't understand this, is if you have a large piece of property, is a rover outside so that he can drive through your parking lot, because that's where a lot of the domestic issues happen, not inside your church, but outside. So you need to make sure that these people, that you have the positions that you can set it up. You need to have somebody in your children's ministry, in your worship center, your rover. And of course, you need to map out what their roles are and what to do in case of a fire, a tornado, or a disruptive attendee. Just like we were talking about a minute ago, when we had a tornado watch that happened a couple of years back, I was under the impression that the worship center was the safest place to be. Well, come to find out, it was this right in here, because the walls are cinder block and have been made specifically in case of a tornado and hurricane. So we need to know this. This needs to be a part of our plan so we know exactly where to take the congregation in these type of environments. So like I said, I was kind of like taken by surprise when I came back and the maintenance guy said, no, it wouldn't have been the worship center. It would have been in the children's ministry. That would have been my last thought. But we need to make sure that we understand those things and know those things. Now, one of the things that comes up all the time in our discussion on setting up a safety team is armed or unarmed. And this is something that we could do a whole hour on, and I'm not going to go into it. If you had an opportunity to listen to the webinar that we did last week with James Simmons, he talked about legalities. He talked about, because in Florida we have the stand your ground. But what you need to do is check your local laws on carrying. Now, I never, ever, if you are going to carry armed in your church, I would never recommend open carry. I just would not. That telegraphs to the bad guy who is carrying inside your church. I would not. And plus, that might make certain people who are coming to visit your church feel uneasy. I would never recommend that. But check with your attorney and also your insurance company if you're thinking about having armed safety team members. And you need to put into place a plan on how you're going to do that. You should be watching for that, and you should be talking about that before it ever goes into play. How you feel about it and what you're going to do. Get a sign off from your church staff and your leaders, because this is a very important decision. And like I said, we could go for an hour talking about this, but right now we're just going to keep on going. This is putting the plan together. Now, reopening the church. This is something that you need to start talking about, because this is very important. And what you need to do is you need to have procedures in place for reopening the church. Listen to what the state and the CDC are saying about crowds. Now, DeSantis just opened up Florida. He's never really stopped the church, but I can tell you right now, No matter what you do, whether you have 10 people in your church, 100 with a big building, I can tell you right now, we're not going to be meeting in our church for a while because we have a large congregation. We're a small mega church. So right now, it's not going to happen for us because I'll tell you why. The other Sunday, I got a call from one of the church staff members that there was a Jeep Fest going on our property. Now, we have a large campus. We have almost 29 acres of property. And he told me that a rally was happening and that Jeeps were driving through the area or driving through the parking lot or the open field, and they were doing wheelies and donuts and tearing up the church ground and everything. So, of course, I jumped in my car and headed up that way. And when I got there were 25 Jeeps sitting out there. But when I got out of my car, I realized that this was just a group of people getting together. I happened to recognize a friend, a guy that I played softball with that went to our church. And I went over and asked him what was going on. And he said that one of the members of this Jeep club, their son had just turned 16. And of course, because of the, social distancing and not having a lot of people in a certain area, they couldn't have a 16-year birthday party. So what they did was they met at the church as a rally point, and then they drove past this house as in a parade, honked their horns, put out gifts next to the road, but they did what they were supposed to be doing. And so they met back up at the church. But here's the problem that we ran into. Somebody saw them, called the church and complained and said that we were having a drive-in church ceremony, which we weren't, and then called local law enforcement to complain about us doing or having these people on our property. Like I said, it's going to be difficult at first. There's going to be a lot of people that don't want us to get together, but we have to start planning for the reopening. Document all your procedures on what you're going to do. If you have multiple services, how are you going to clean in between those multiple services? You have to protect people. Are you going to allow masks? And if you are going to allow masks, or if you're going to require masks, are you going to have those masks available for people who walk in the door that don't have them? This is something that you really start to need to think about. Social distancing. I was reading an article written by a church that had opened up. That's a small church, around 100 to 150 members, but it is a smaller church, and they had the room to be able to do social distancing, and they used a swimming pool noodle because it's about 6 feet long for the social distancing. That's the first time I've ever heard of a swimming pool noodle really being used for something good, But it's these type of things that we need to be thinking about. How are we going to do it? Social distancing is going to be very difficult. People are going to want to hug each other because they haven't seen each other in a long time. You need to contact your local law enforcement, and you need to make sure that they're on board with you having these services, because we've seen it happen where they've gone in and done things that just kind of blow our mind when we talk about this type of environment. We need to make sure that we're taking all the things that we need to be doing in the right way. So talk with your medical team. Talk with your medical team, because we want to make sure that the medical team is on board, and plus they can teach us what to look for. They have questions that they know how to ask. Have you been out of the country? Have you been anywhere near somebody that has had the virus? Have you been feeling sick? All these different questions. Have you had a fever? They have these 3 easy questions that they can ask people, but they also can look for the symptoms because they have been around it. And they're going to tell you right off the bat, they're going to be wanting to wear masks. I can tell you that right now. Also, know in advance what you're going to do in case you do have a breakout from your church. So to reopen the church again, let's talk about that. Follow state, local, and CDC rules of engagement. Document your procedures on how you're going to do this. Mask, cleaning, all these different things like that. Social distancing. Contact your local law enforcement and let them know that you're going to have people on the property. You're still going to get the calls. People are going to call and complain. Talk with your medical team. Also talk with your safety team, because they're going to be ones also looking, especially when we talk about masks, whether you have masks or not. This just opens up a whole new, it's not an issue, but it just opens up a whole new kind of stressor for your safety teams. And then know in advance what you're going to do in case you do have an outbreak from your church. Make sure that you have cameras that are videotaping the people that are in your church, because of the fact that if somebody does end up coming down with the virus, you want to make sure anybody that they came into contact inside your church. So you have to be watching for this. Your next step, you'll be putting together a safety team, and that's what we'll talk about next week. But right now, what we want to do is talk about the plan and make sure that we're all together on the plan. So putting this all together now, this is the sign of the times. We need to understand that we need to have a safety team just because of what we're going through right now. Yes, we always should have had safety teams because of the incidents that we've gone through in the past. But now is just, we have to get out here. There's going to be more people coming to our church. With the reopening of the church, you need to have a safety team in there that can help you with some issue that may come up. Go to the Bible. We talked about those verses in Ezekiel and Nehemiah, Isaiah, and Ephesians. That is your mantra for your safety plan. That is your mantra for your safety team. Look at the issues that are going to be facing your churches. Those with your children's ministry, those with the homeless, those who are now in pain and suffering and going through this, maybe have lost a job, lost a loved one, close to suicide. They're looking for answers. We know where the answers are. The answers are Christ. Put together the planning of this. Look at your strengths and weaknesses. Set up your positions, whether or not you want to be armed or unarmed. And then, of course, looking at reopening your church. Then our next step is putting together a safety team. So now I'm going to open it up. Do you have any questions? Wendy, do we have any questions out there? Wendy?
I don't have any questions right now. If anybody has a question, let us know.
I know it takes people some time to type, but
I have not seen anything. Last week we had so many questions I couldn't answer them all.
It must have been because James was here. If anything, make sure that you're looking at this right here, because this is what we have. If you do not have a safety team, you need to go to your leaders and you need to put this out here. The signs of the times, go to the Bible. Issues facing the church, planning, your strength and weakness assessment, positions, how many people you think you may need for a safety team, whether or not it's going to be armed or unarmed, and reopening the church. These are things that we have to be looking at.
So a question I have for you guys, let us know in the question and answer, did you find this helpful? Okay, so John Frone, once you have a safety team leader, how do you decide who has, once you have a safety team leader, how do you decide who to have as team members?
Well, that would be something that we would cover in setting up your safety team, but they need to be following the same guidelines as the safety team leader. They need to be following the same, where Paul talked in Titus about the overseers. And what you do is just take the overseers and just switch the name to watchmen, because you can't let just anybody be on your safety team. All right, you need to have them do a record check, but I'm going to say this right now, that if they have something in the past that happened a long time ago, then this is something that you need to sit down with them and do a vetting. We have questions that we ask. If you want a copy of those questions, we'll be more than happy to pass them out. But you also need to get to know them a little bit better. One of the things that we talk about is that if they don't have law enforcement or military experience, then we want them to have served somewhere else in the church. I love people coming out of the children's ministry. I can tell you right now, because they have the patience of Job. Because a lot of the people that have police or military experience don't have the patience that we see. So this is the type of thing that we really look for, is that they have to serve somewhere else in the church. Now, we had a guy a couple of months ago that had, well, it was about a year ago, bigger guy. We said he had to serve somewhere in the church. He said, no, he only wanted to serve in the safety team. I don't want him on the team. And then he came back to me though, and then he said, what do you need me to do? And I said, serve. And the next week he was serving communion and working with the offering. So he stepped right in and did exactly what I wanted him to do. And now he's on the safety team. Okay, next one.
Okay. Next question is from Jeff Page. Hey, Wendy, Jeff Page. I was thinking about a non-touch thermal thermometer as people enter.
If you have a small congregation, I mean, churches are talking about that they have put out the lines outside, the 6 feet line, so people need to stay back as they're coming in. I would see no problem in that, but I would hope that your congregation are going to be adults, and if they don't feel well, they stay home. I mean, this is what we need to really be pushing to our church members. If they do not, feel well, please don't come in. You're just going to spread it again. So, wash your hands, keep your hands, no handshaking anymore. Hugging, which is going to be very difficult for me, is out for a while. Do the Spock, live long and prosper. It's just that we have to make sure that we do the social distancing, which is going to be difficult. Next.
Gregory just said, yes, this was very helpful. We've had a team for 2 years, but it has been fairly informal. Next is Brian Dunn. Do you have a template or checklist for churches that are just starting out with setting up a safety team? We're a small church with a larger facility.
There are templates out here. I kind of hate to recreate the wheel, but I will get one for you. Make sure that I know I have your email address because you signed up for this. So yes, we can get you something like that. There are plenty of companies out here that do it. I just kind of know what we do on our assessments and how we walk through the church, and then we do our checklist for that specific church. There's others that give you a generic one, and I've got a couple of those, and I can pass them on to you.
So Brian, just feel free to email me or Jim tomorrow, and we'll get all that squared away, or tonight. And then the next one is from John Jacobson. Jim, our church layout, we have 13 safety per service. Do you think that's too much?
I like to have as many as I can. Now, you don't want to burn them out, though. So, when you say 13, I can find positions for them. And a lot of times what people don't realize is that we may have more than what we showed you on the screen inside the church, but we have them in different positions so that we know where they are. In case we have a suspicious incident, then we would have them go and sit, or be in that area to let them know that this is somebody they should be watching. Most of the time they've already watched them. I mean, most of the time they see them when they walk in the door. But we always tell our guys, if they're on campus, they should go ahead and put on a radio, because the thing of it is that if something were to happen, they're going to jump into action anyway. So isn't it better if they know what's going on by the radio? So we tell them to put the radios on, or if they see something, they can put it out on the radio. So no, I don't think 13 is too much. It depends on well, let me ask you another question. How big is your congregation, If you only have 26 people, then 13 might be too many, but
Well, it's New Day.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, 13 is not that many. I mean, 13 is a good number, but don't burn them out. You don't have to, if you have multiple services, have them in on one service and out on the other. That's what we do with ours. Because we have multiple services, we ask all the safety team members to do at least 2 services. They're inside the worship center so they can worship, and they're outside so that they can watch the outside, the gathering, the rovers, and then the children's ministry. Now, I have people coming up to me all the time and they go, but I can't worship if I've got the radio on. Really? If something happens, you're not going to be worshiping anyway. So it's better if you're on radio so that we can get you involved instead of just sitting there not knowing what's happening.
Okay, Kevin McCon just made a comment. Great information that needs to be shared with leadership and our teams. And then we have a question here. Where do you recommend getting sanitizing products? Seems all the retailers are out. That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know where you're at. I don't know what's your location. That would be a question I'd ask, because I do know that a lot of places are starting to have these cleaning products back. Now they limit them, but in Illinois. Okay. Gosh, I know that I'm seeing more and more cleaning products out there, but of course this is in Florida. And we know people at the grocery stores. We know people that work inside these places that if we had to go in and talk to them, we probably would be able to get them. There are people that do these do-it-yourselves where they get like alcohol, but of course alcohol is probably scarce right now, and use like aloe vera and different things like that. But that's a good question. I would have to look into that, especially in your area, especially in your area.
Okay, and we have, I'm going to jump over to the chat because we did have a couple come in over there. Let me just take a look real quick. Something I've discussed with my safety dream team is for impromptu fire storm drills. Should we do impromptu fire or storm drills at our church? AED training, first aid, CPR. I have a safety training in my last job in Lawrence, Kansas, but I was involved with both safety awareness and action in factory plant environment. Should we have storm fire drills at Radiant?
Yes, you should. But what your drill should be is for your staff and your volunteers, not for your church members. That's just going to confuse it and make it a little more difficult to do it. And the reason why I say it that way is that your staff, okay, one of the things that we talk about, and this is getting into the safety team, and this is also getting into the training. Every volunteer, except for your safety team, I don't like safety team members with badges on, but I know that some of y'all do that. That's fine. I'm not going to tell you no. But every volunteer that you have should have a name tag on. And the reason why, that is a badge of authority. So if all of a sudden the fire alarm went off, the first thing that people are going to turn around and look for are people that are going to have name tags on, because they're going to be looking for them for instructions on what to do. So when you do this type of training, make sure that your staff and your volunteers are in on it, because you want them to be familiar of where people go. When we talk about our fire training, we take our children's ministry to a specific location away from the general congregation. And the reason why we do that is we want to make sure that we get all the kids out safely. So we get the children's ministry out, they do a head count, go through their list, make sure that they got everybody, and then we release them to the parents. Of course, our safety team goes out there and helps out with making sure that everything's okay. But your ushers and your greeters, your volunteers, any of your volunteers should have name tags on. So in case of emergencies, people will turn around and see the badge and realize that this is a person of authority and can look at them and say, what do I do next? Now, you need to make sure that when you get new people to volunteer, that they are aware of what to do in case of a fire, where to go in case of a fire, where to go in case of a storm, where to go, any type of emergency. Get down. We teach in ours, we teach kind of an alert, barricade, and confront. Well, in the barricade portion of this, the ushers and the greeters are supposed to be yelling at people, and staff supposed to be yelling at people to get down inside the worship center so that they get out of sight. We don't need them to be running around because we're trying to take care of the threat. So like I said, you can do these, and I would recommend doing these, but I would limit it to staff, volunteers, and ushers, greeters, and the different people like that.
So we have another question. It's from Tony down at Gulf Coast, down in St. Pete.
Tony.
Jim, I'm concerned about children's ministry. We have a lot of kids. Any suggestions on how to handle that?
Well, what specifically are you looking for on that? I mean, that's a whole hour on children's ministry. I mean,
I think that would be a good whole training session.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, the basics. Here are the basics. Make sure that record checks are done on all children's ministry people. Also, before they come in and just start working in the children's ministry, they need to have somebody that trust, and has worked in the children's ministry for years to kind of be with them for on-the-job training, just to be able to get a good feel about how this person responds or acts around children. Make sure that you have a check-in and a check-out. And when you do the check-in, check-out, it should be 2 tickets, one that goes with the child, hopefully with an adhesive on it that you can take off the back of it and put it on the child. And the other one goes to the parent who dropped off the child. And unless that parent has that ticket, now the wife may go and give it to the husband, but the husband comes back and does have the ticket, that's the only way that they get that child. You know, we want, I like to see where the children's ministry is able to lock down, that they have doors that have locks on them, that in case of a situation happens and we know that we can't be moving around too much, we need to be able to lock the doors to make it difficult for people to get inside and to really work on, you know, the safety of the children. I'm sorry, I just had a message of the internet being a little unstable, but I'm hopefully you're still hearing me. There's a whole different thing that we could do on talking about children's safety, but first thing off the bat, you got to make sure that the staff that you have is the best staff out there, and that their love for their children, the love for everybody's children, that they're going to protect them no matter what the situation is.
So we're about 45 minutes into this, and I think all the questions have been answered. So let's go ahead and close out for tonight.
All right, dear. Go ahead.
Oh, he was considering with the situation, Tony. So this is Tony. I was considering with the situation now at this church, at this time on the church reopening.
Okay, that is a good question, and that's something that I can't address. A lot of the churches that I've been listening to and the pastors that have been talking about have kind of halted the children's ministry until there's more, you know, we get a little closer to back to normal. A lot of them are asking that the parents bring the kids with them to church. Now, that's going to be disruptive in the church service if they're very young. But a lot of the churches that I've been listening to and paying attention to have not opened up their children's ministry yet, because even though, I don't want to get into an argument on this one, even though I think that there's been maybe 1 or 2 cases where they've gotten a virus, we do know that they can be carriers. I understand that. But churches are not having their children's ministry start back up yet. In fact, we just got word from one of the churches that they shut down their school finally. After getting so many complaints about it, they were still trying to run a school. It was a small school. They were able to do the social distancing. They were able to do a lot of things that the CDC required, but there was a big push to shut it down. So like I said, a lot of your churches are not even going to open up their children's ministry until it gets a little more back to normal. So that is a sad thing. I don't know how to address that any other way, because of the simple fact that kids can be carriers.
All right, we don't have any more questions out there.
All right.
Oh. What about small groups like Celebrate Recovery?
We've been doing Zoom. We've been using Zoom. I mean, we use Zoom for almost all of our small groups now. I mean, that might not help. And you can also put them in also smaller groups. I mean, you have to have somebody that knows a little bit about Zoom on being able to do it. But our Monday night men's group we do on Zoom. And I know that a lot of the churches I talk to have went to some sort of video conferencing to make sure that people can still show up, talk, have those relationships. It's not the perfect scenario, I know, but you know, let's go back for a second. A lot of these places are allowing you to have small groups. As long as you can show that you're doing social distancing, I would recommend that you would wear face masks and things like this. But be able to show, if somebody walked in the door, that you don't have 100 people jam-packed into a room that can only hold 20. You get yourself a larger space, you have it there, the complaint comes in, an officer or somebody walks in and sees that you're practicing the social distancing, you're using the face mask, you have disinfectant cleaners, hand sanitizers all through the church. I really don't think you're going to have a problem. They're opening up the churches. Let's make sure that we're clear on this. A lot of places have not said churches cannot meet, but where I think you run into a problem, this is one of the things I talked about. We talked about this last week. You need to check with your insurance company too. You need to make sure that you check with them, because think of it. It's just the world that we live in. If I come to your church and you're telling me it's safe and you don't practice everything that the CDC says you're supposed to be practicing, and I come down with COVID-19, you have to watch out for some of these people that might want to come against the church. So I don't see any problem. I mean, I know that I have people in my small men's group, and the reason why we're going to continue to do the Zoom until we kind of get a better feel for how it's going, because I do have people in my Monday night men's group that are over the age of 65, have more than, have a couple of the contributors that they don't want respiratory issues, diabetes, heart conditions, different things like that. So we're going to stay with the Zoom for a while. Like I said, I think we need to slowly start opening up the churches. If your Celebrate Recovery is a small group, I think you could do it. This is my personal opinion. I would say that I think you would be okay, but I would follow the guidelines to the nth degree. I would do face masks, or at least social distancing to the max, and make sure that you have plenty of space that people can move away from each other.
One of the comments we have is CR has received permission to do online groups currently, as long as there is no recording of the videos. Suggestion is to do live video streams from 1 or 2 leaders going over a lesson instead of a small group discussion or testimony.
And that's kind of what we were talking about. You could do, we have worked with schools that do breakout sessions, and there's a way to have rooms. So you could have everybody together to begin with, and then go to the other rooms. You could give other people permission to be a co-host to that room, and would allow only the people that are supposed to be in that room at that time. So there are ways of doing that. Yes, whoever that was, thank you.
That was John. That was your guy, John.
Oh, thanks, John.
Okay, so there's no more questions. You want to go ahead and wrap it up?
Sure. Okay, we do a church safety network. We do a Facebook Live on Sunday at 8:00 p.m. This is basically on stuff that we're just kind of seeing during the week. We're going to try to change this a little bit because we're going to continue to do the trainings on Thursday night, but we're going to be changing this up a little bit and talking about current events, some of the things that we're seeing. So this is something new. This is something different. We're going to change it just a little bit, but come out. Facebook, it's 30 minutes. We're in there and we're out, and we just tell you of things that we're seeing and things that we need to be paying attention to. Our resources, we are now putting these videos out on YouTube. You can go out right now and look at these. If you know of people that were not on tonight, this video is being recorded and will be out on YouTube for future looking at. So make sure you let people know about this. Subscribe when you go to Trinity Security Allies. Subscribe for us. That helps us out in the long run. If we can get enough people to subscribe to our videos, then we can start seeing something that helps the ministry out. We've got our free resources out there. We've got all these things that we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks. Next week, we'll be talking about developing the safety team. And then after that, like I said, we're going to be doing a whole session on carrying weapons in a church. We're also going to be doing then next Sunday morning what to look for, which gets into our situational awareness and our threat profiling. We need to find sponsors to help us out. I mean, this is just critical because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get out to the smaller churches. We know that over 90% of our churches are 500 or less. 60% of those are under 100 or less. And we want to get out there and be able to give them training without having to hurt them financially. So if you know of somebody that's looking for a 501c3 that they would like to sponsor, we would love to hear about it. We would love to talk to them, sit down with them, and show them what we're doing, how many churches we're talking to, and how many churches we're working with, but just to expand the kingdom of God and protecting the flock. You got to have some sort of protection if you're carrying a concealed weapon. I'm just going to say, we say this over and over again. USCCA is a way that you can help us. They do have different types of protection out there. So we are affiliates of theirs. They treat us very well. Go to our website and click on the USCCA logo, and it'll take you right into where you can sign up. If you're carrying a concealed weapon out in the public, especially in these crazy days, you should have something that kind of protects you. Ways to support us, of course, prayer. Number one, I truly believe in prayer. I also believe that God is in control, and we're going to come out of this COVID virus, this pandemic, on the other side doing just great. We do have memberships. It's $125 for the churches a month. There is a discount if you sign up for the year. We're going to have online membership program. Now, the online membership program is going to have weekly online training and access to videos that other people will not. Plus, we'll give you one ticket to the church safety conference. Now, it's $20 a month if you join, but before the 31st of May. Yes, 31st of May. So this gives you, like I said, other access to other videos that nobody else will see. This will allow you to take it back to your teams and do the training. But this is a membership that we're doing. Also, have us come out and do training for your church, and then also donations. With a church membership, it's $125 a month or $1,200 a year. You get 5 church safety conference tickets. You get consulting phone calls to me, 2 3-hour trainings, or 1 complete 4-hour full day training. A 4-hour simulation training can be used as one of your 3-hour trainings. Access to the personal webinar, the church safety network training at no extra cost. Discount full strength and weakness assessment, recommendations detailing the priorities for your church, and discounted additional training. These are the type of training that we're going to be doing: why churches need safety teams and how to set up a safety team, situational awareness and threat profiling. I've been out here recently, and I am so happy to see that a lot of the professionals are starting to teach situational awareness, threat profiling, verbal de-escalation, because too many people teach just active shooter. Active shooter is reactive training. We need to be proactive. We need to be watching for the bad guy when he comes into the church. Thank you for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out and give us a call. Take care.